All right. One more. I think this is the last page of these, but one more. Who's there, Walter? I'm going to get fooled again. So I invite you... Knock, knock, to who? I invite you to think about these in terms of regional varieties of English. Yeah. Yes, Walter. Are you from Philadelphia, Kiwi? Thought so. But originally, yeah. All right. I know there's a lot of hatred going on these. So, these are all... Well, okay, so number one, Ben said you wouldn't get run out of town with it. How's everybody feel about number one? Government seems singular. Yeah. Is Corey still here? I want to know what Corey thinks of number one. Because everybody who's commenting... So here's the thing. Number one, in American English, certainly, and it sounds like Australian English, although I don't know the details there, is definitely singular, right? However, in British English, this is a very common construction. You will see it in edited journalism all the time. The government is using plural for group nouns, right? The government is an entity. American English, it's treated as a singular thing. In British English, it's the plural is fine, depending on the context. And in fact, in sports team, when they're talking about sports teams, like, in fact, like, this isn't my observation, but somebody pointed out, if you were to read a headline in a British newspaper saying, England collapse, with the plural verb collapse, right? You would probably assume that they meant the English team, like the English soccer team or whatever, collapsed, right? They had a bad day. If you read England collapses, that would be the country is collapsing, right? But in standard British English, like in received, like standard British English, the R is fine. For Americans, it seems very odd, right? We have a strong preference for the singular for almost all collective nouns. There are only a handful of collective nouns in American English that are always plural. And they're so common that you probably never even really think about them. I mean, the two that I can think of immediately are people, right? People are, and police, right? The police are here, not the police is here, right? Anytime you're thinking of something that multiple people are involved with and working on separately, then the plural would work, right? But this is a regional difference, right? Now, everything else here is also a regional difference. Clearly, most of you are not, or except for Kiwi, none of you are from the regions where these are used, right? I might could loan you the money. Might could. This is very characteristic of certain Southern American English varieties, especially places like North Carolina, that sort of thing. That extra modal verb might could expresses an extra degree of uncertainty. So might could is very tentative. Like, yeah, there's an outside chance that I might loan you the money. Right. Hank watches a lot of TV anymore. Anybody okay with that one in their general construction? Nobody's from like the Midwest, the upper Midwest around listening. Yeah, so the anymore. So anymore normally functions, okay, in standard English and in most varieties of English. Anymore is limited to negative context, or more properly, non-positive context. This is parallel to what we were talking about with any before. And by non-positive, that includes like hypothetical situations and stuff like this. However, in a lot of places in the Midwest, that different. So we would say, you could easily say Hank doesn't watch a lot of TV anymore, right? That's perfectly fine in most varieties of English. But for people from the Midwest of the US, this positive anymore is sort of a characteristic feature of the language. What anymore in the positive sense means nowadays. But this is a dialect, this is a regional dialect form, right? I'm not suggesting you add it to your language unless you're living in Chicago or something like that, right? Yeah, these days, exactly, Kiwi, right? Nowadays, Hank watches a lot of TV these days, right? Now, Kiwi was fine originally with number 4, and that's why I asked if she was from Pittsburgh, because this is a very characteristic construction from the Pittsburgh area. Needs washed. Everybody else says needs to be washed, right? Using the washed, yeah, or needs washing, yeah, either one, but not needs washed without just the reduced particle, is exactly right. This is a that you used to be with love Philly. Yeah, exactly. Needs to be washed. Yeah, exactly. But if you're in Pennsylvania, the needs washed construction is extremely common, right? Or and it's not just the car. It's not just with needs washed, but needs corrected instead of needs correcting or whatever it might be. So if you have zero issues with you, it's because that's your regional dialect, but people outside of it, it's not standard English, right? Happened she were wearing a mask. Nobody, we don't have any, it's too late at night for Brits. I wish there were more Brits in the stream. I'd like to ask. The last two are British regional English. Right. Yeah. It happened that she was wearing a mask, right? She were, using invariant were is very common in a number of different places. This one in particular is like Northern English, Northern British English. It's like another thing. That's going to rain tomorrow. Also probably sounds really bizarre to all of you, unless you're from like East Anglia, where using that instead of it there is extremely common, right? So every single one of these is gonna feels weird to most of you, right? But in regional varieties, they are perfectly descriptively grammatical, right? Yep. All right. Switching topics a little bit. I'll give you a minute to take in this. Take in this cartoon. All of these are, well, four of the five corrections are ordinary. Well, I mean, you could say all of them are prescriptively grammatical in the sense that people will try to tell you to change them. The question is, which of these are well-founded in standard written English, and which are bullshit? You'd say prawns, yeah. In American English, we would probably normally say shrimp, right? Shrimp is treated as a collective noun. Oh, none of these are prescriptively grammatical. Yeah, yes. And well, the first one, Emmy, on the previous slide, the government are considering the problem. That is prescriptively grammatical in British English. And even the American English books usually mention that situation, even though nobody in America ever really writes that way. Yeah, hurry and fast is fine. That's what I had in mind when I put the title above, the thing, incorrection, which is a term that sort of a coined word for a situation where someone corrects the language. Yeah, well, eat it shrimp. Yeah, it doesn't have the same language because their shrimp refers to individuals, right? So there it's being used as a count noun. So shrimps, multiple individual things, but eat shrimp, right, is different. If you're eating the shrimps, I don't know, there might be some problem there. Hurry and fast. Hurry in quickly. You just say hurry in, right? Now, so let's look at the others first. Let's come to the others. So today's special, apostrophe S, that's clearly standard. Their, Their, that's the correct spelling, right? This could be yours, no apostrophe, fine. Hurry and fast, though, is like, okay, quickly would work, but here's the thing. Fast is an adverb, right? Think about it. You drive fast, right? You go fast, right? Fast is an adverb. There are there are not a large number of adverbs, but there are plenty of adverbs in English, especially common ones, that do not get their adverbness by adding an ly, right? Not every adverb ends in ly. So yeah, hurry in. So quickly is an unnecessary correction, right? I mean, it's not wrong in and of itself, but like you don't need it. Not everything that somebody will point out as being wrong actually is. All right. You will find from time to time, hey, burritos, how's it going? Good to see you. From time to time, you will find grammar books, not very well written grammar books, but you will find grammar books that tell you bullshit stuff. To explain what's going on here, I have to give you a little bit of background, and that is a kind of error that people talk about in writing. It's called a dangling modifier, right? And the first sentence here is an authentic example, like from an actual newspaper, of a real dangling modifier. What's odd about that sentence? I do collect grammar book spins. I hope the first sentence makes you smile. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Burritos. I'm glad you're negative, but that's terrible. I did not play King's Quest 5 pins. Yeah, poor Walter is dusty, right? Poor Walter P. Stanley has been lost for years under a pile of dust, right? Exactly. Causes confusion about what they are talking about. So the way dangling modifiers are often described, I mean, there is like, well, the way they're often described is pretty bad. I have my own way of describing them, which is slightly different. But the way I like to think about it is, in that opening modifier there, after years of being lost under a pile of dust, there's there's a verb there. There's a verb form, being, which has an implied subject, right? What's being lost under the dust? When you have this kind of structure, right, you you want to match it up. You want to make sure that that modifier, the subject of the clause that it's attached to, is the implied subject of the modifier, right? So what's lost? What's lost are the old records. That's not the subject here. Walter P. Stanley III is the subject, right? And this is a really common topic of a lot of usage books. Princeton Review, which is like a company that prepares like prep, students for test preparation, like SAT, ACT, that kind of stuff. They have a book, Grammar Smart. I actually found this years ago. Lost is the main verb. Yeah, you're right, Sogos, but being is a verb form, right? What we're talking about is the verb form. It's a participle, which is a form of the verb. Those verb forms have implied subjects too. So, badly for a few days. Sorry to hear that, Burritos. I'm glad you're feeling better, though. Really. I know somebody actually who's sort of locked down because their partner got exposed to got COVID, and is like, even though they were vaccinated, they got like a breakthrough infection, and so they're like in one half of the house, and the other people in the house are in the other half, and they're like, closed doors, leaving stuff at the doorstep. It's a real mess. Yeah, exactly. Or you could just move it, right? Walter P. Stanley found all the old records of the Bangor clause, or just add they after they had been lost for years under a pile of dust, right? There's a lot of different ways you can fix this, right? But you do have to do a bit of rewriting. Simply moving it around usually doesn't fix the problem, okay? So that's the basic idea behind dangling modifier, right? Now, this book, this Princeton Review book, doesn't have a named author, so just probably written by committee, claims that that they found this example. This is just a quote from them. Hey, no worries, Burritos. It's, when you're sick, you're sick. You gotta just take care of yourself first. Glad you're here now. So, an ad for natural Ultra Plus pads. So incredibly thin, you'll never know it's there. See the misplaced modifier? They mean dangling modifier. They wrote misplaced. That's a separate error, but I'm not going to get into that. What follows the comma should be what's so incredibly thin. But the pad is incredibly thin, not you. Now, this might not be obvious. There is nothing wrong with the sentence, Emmy. It is not a dangling modifier. This is an elliptical version. So incredibly thin is not the same kind of like participial or gerund phrase that we have in the authentic dangling modifier example. What it is a comparative clause. This is an elliptical sentence. They've elliptical in the sense that they've left out certain words. if we spell it out in full, it's the pads, or it is so incredibly thin, you will never know it's there, right? The comma, in other words, is not there to separate a modifier from the main part of the sentence. It's there to mark the absence of that, and the comparative structure. The people writing the book don't know enough grammar to accurately diagnose what is a dangling modifier and what is a comparative structure. And 2, they are so caught up in mechanically applying this rule that they don't even ask whether there is any sort of sensible, other way of doing it. It's just, it must violate the rule, right? They're looking mechanically at the pattern and do it, right? So, yeah, it is fine. So there's no issues at all with it. It's not a dangling modifier. It's not just seems fine. It is fine, even prescriptively. This is an example of incorrection. This is an example of a grammar book telling you something is wrong when it's not, even if, with the strictest standards of standard English, right? Hopefully, and by the way, that is another word that usage books sometimes don't like. Hopefully, by the time we will get through this course, you will have enough confidence to, make these sorts of judgments yourself. You can't have grammar with no syntax. Yeah, exactly. You will. We're going to learn syntax. We're going to learn real syntax.